everybody, Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux with the DRF race of the day for Sunday, September the 3rd. It's race number 10 at Del Mar, the Grade 2 $300,000 Del Mar Derby. 3-year-olds going 1.1 miles on the turf. Before we take a look at the field, remember that the DRF Labor Day sale is ongoing at shop.drf.com. Get up to 50% off PP's picks, clock reports, the digital paper, and lots more. Again, it's shop.drf.com. Here's the field for the Grade 2 Del Mar Derby. Please click or scan the QR code for Race of the Day access on mobile, which includes free Formulator Pass performances. And actually, this is a fairly wide open field. The 2 and the 3 Conclude and Maltese Falcon come off stakes victories at Del Mar, and both look good doing it.
Both looked really good. I think in the case to Conclude, obviously, it was the question of the distance, and there was no problem stretching out from 6.5 to 1 mile in Maltese Falcon. It's not too often you see horses graduate in graded events, but was able to finally put it together after knocking at the door for a couple of races. And even outside of these two, there's a couple of other runners in here. I'm looking at maybe post 5 and post 6, Panic Alarm. These horses have live shots in here as well.
Now, the question, as you mentioned about Conclude going into the Oceanside, was could he stay the mile? Now, the question is, can he stay 1.1 miles? The good news for fans of Conclude is he at least has the speed to make his own trip, and Timeform US projects that he'll be on the lead after the opening half mile. He sat a little bit last time out, so it's nice to know there's a bit of versatility.
You can see Request is the horse that's, maybe going to be tracking him early. He comes out of some very fast races, but I think the scary part here is if Conclude gets lonely on the lead, even stretching out and getting that additional 1/8 of a mile, you wonder how bold he can get on the front end here.
The number 1 is Odd G's, and they've done a lot with Odd G's throughout his career. He's had success sprinting on the turf. They ran him on the dirt, and he had success sprinting in Dubai. And his most recent start, they ran him in the Oceanside. He ran okay. He was down on the inside most of the way, finished a solid 3rd. While there are questions about Conclude getting the mile, I have serious questions about this horse going 9.
I'm curious about him. Last time out, I thought he had some trouble in that race and it was going 1 mile. I think I'm more concerned that he's inconsistent throughout his career. That's been a big thing. But I thought last time at the mile, it was an okay performance considering the trouble that he had. Maybe an exotics possibility here, maybe, rounding out a try or a super at best. But I could see why you have reservations because in the past, the mile hasn't been the best for him.
It is his second start of the form cycle, however, perhaps he could take a step forward. In his last race, produced a Beyer top. Let's watch Conclude win the Oceanside. He broke very sharply, going 2 turns for the first time, conceded the lead and sat second. He's taken over already by the time we pick up the video. He's a little bit late to change leads, but he's strong in the stretch, and it looks like Phil D'Amato's got another quality turf horse.
Very, very much so. This was a huge effort. It's always tough going from 6.5 on the downhill, then going to a flat mile. And he was switching tracks as well, right? Going to Del Mar, so a different configuration and track than he's used to. But I thought it was a good effort. I like that he was able to sit early. I know he's been forwardly placed in some of his races. He's tried to close from off of it, but I thought he showed a new dimension in that race. And like I said earlier, if he gets lonely on the lead, I think he can go 9 furlongs.
As you mentioned, Ashley, the 3 Maltese Falcon was a maiden going into this race, the Grade 3 La Jolla last time out, but he had certainly proved in his prior starts that he belonged in this field. He went off favored, and he got a beautiful trip under Juan Hernandez, sitting the pocket, sneaking through along the inside. But this is the best part of the race. Once he gets through, he really fires the final 1/16 of a mile.
Yeah, this is a pretty impressive last couple strides to the wire. And he was coming out of races where he was racing longer, 1.1 miles, 1.25 miles. So to see him graduated 1.16 miles, now going back to 1.1 miles, that's not a question. And I just think since he had that break between March and May, he's just been a better horse. All of his efforts, even when he was second and third, he was second behind Wizard of Westwood. His 3rd place finished behind Act 3. I think they're really decent races, and he's a horse that I think as he gets older, he's probably going to go longer than this distance.
The 4 Request was placed first via disqualification in this race. His turf debut, a first level allowance earlier in the Del Mar meet. He's had a pretty good trip, but once he swung to the outside, he was forced even farther out into the track, was bumped a little bit, and then a horse that sneaks on through was able to get the better of him. He ran very well, considering it was only his 4th lifetime start, his first time on turf, and his first going 2 turns.
Yeah, it was a huge effort. I think the big thing with Request is the break. If this horse doesn't break, we've seen two starts where he hasn't been forwardly placed, and they've resulted in 37 buyers. When he's been good, he's had 87s in both. It's kind of funny to see that, but to see him try the turf last time out and him get the win, I thought it was a good performance, even though he technically finished second. I think from a pace perspective, as we saw with the projections, he should be pretty close to it as well, but he is going to have to extend himself a little further now.
D'Amato has the speed with the number 2. He has a quality closer as well. The number 5, Almendarez, has won his last 3 races, including this race, his North American debut in a first-level allowance, and he just has a strong stretch kick. He settled into a good position in mid-pack on the backstretch. The pace was fair, and he just puts these horses away in the lane.
And you never know what these horses are going to do, especially in their first start coming from overseas. He wasn't really cold on the tote board, but he wasn't necessarily hot either. And I thought he raced very well. He's another lightly raced horse in this field. That was just his 6th career start. He got that 86 buyer speed figure. I'm intrigued by him. He only had a couple beaten early on in that race, and the pace wasn't as quick as some of these other races that these horses exit. So you wonder if the pace is at least moderate. You'd have to think he's going to be flying late.
The 6, Panic Alarm, is another horse making his 2nd start in the U.S. We saw him finish 2nd behind Maltese Falcon in the La Jolla. While Maltese Falcon was able to save ground every step of the way, this horse had to go around, and maybe that was the difference. He only was beaten a length.
Yeah, I think he lost some ground in that trip, and still it was a good effort overall. John Sadler, maybe not the strongest numbers, kind of suck it off, but I like that this horse had raced at late June, came over and went right to work. Sometimes we see these horses on the sidelines for several months, even longer than that. So it must have been all systems a go when he came over, and now he's going to make his 2nd start. I think he's got some upside as well. And looking at the La Jolla, the field wasn't that big. He only had 1 beaten early on. As you mentioned, he lost some ground. Curious to see where he'll be in this race. It's obviously a bigger field, and I think there's a different sort of pace setup.
The 7 is Smart Code, and this horse finished behind Request when the beaten favorite for the 3rd consecutive start, but he didn't run poorly at all. That was a race where the pace seemed to be pretty solid. They kind of got together, all of them, turning into the stretch, and maybe Smart Code found a little bit of traffic. I'm beginning to wonder about his will. He's only, again, he's been the beaten favorite in his last 3 starts, but he's run competitive races, and he's been fairly consistent.
You said you question his will. I think he's a little bit of a hanger. That might be not saying it as nicely as you did, Dan. It's just, you look at his races 2 and 3 starts back. He had the lead. He surrendered them late. They were still good efforts. I prefer the one going shorter, though, on the downhill than I did that performance back on July 23rd at Del Mar. And then last time out, not the same exact sort of situation. He was trying to make up ground. It's not like he found himself on the lead and then surrendered. But to me, he's a little untrustworthy from what we've seen so far.
Justin's Legacy, the number 8, has some speed, and he's likely to push the 2 horse in the early portion of this race. He went gate to wire at Gulfstream 2 starts back. He was part of the pace in the La Jolla, and while he tired to finish 4th, he was sort of in a blanket for 2nd at the wire. He was still firing on at the end and trying. Maybe he'll be able to sit a little bit more and relax a little bit more, because he was headstrong in that race.
He was headstrong, and he actually had problems before the race as well. I think the big thing, maybe second off, he can take a step forward. Hopefully he'll be a little bit calmer. It was only his first start since that late race at Gulfstream Park, where he was a runaway winner in a race on the mile and 16th at Gulfstream, where he went to the front and set really reasonable fractions. So I think last time out, just very different. They did go a little quicker, but all in all, I think it was an okay performance.
Kid Azteca fire down the center of the track to win 3 starts back sprinting. And I wonder if that's where his destiny will ultimately lie, as sort of a one-run closing sprinter on the downhill. His last 2 races have been, well, the Oceanside wasn't a very good race, but he's had trouble, I think, in both of those starts. The La Jolla, just when he was beginning his run, again, it just seemed like there was that effect where all these horses got bunched up together. He's the kind of runner, to me, that needs a little bit of a setup, though, and the right trip.
I agree. I think he does. And I agree with the Oceanside. I'd probably draw a line through that effort. And if you focus in on the La Jolla, as you mentioned, it was a blanket finish of sorts for the Miners. Maltese Falcon was a length in front of everyone, but everyone else was kind of battling for the Miners. I'm not sure also about the mile and an eighth. I know going back to his 2-year-old season, he had some good efforts at a mile, but he's going to need to at least change his recent form. As we've talked about, it's a little bit muddied in those last two.
Before we get to our top selections, please click the subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. It's top pick time for our Sunday race of the day. It's the Grade 2 Del Mar Derby. We're both going with the speed. We both like Conclude.
If Conclude's lonely, this horse has been able to rally off some pretty quick fractions, even last time out at a mile, and was still much the best. So I'm just, keen in on that fact, and now just making that second start off the layoff. I think this horse can take another step forward.
I'm with you. I think he can get to the front. I like the way he finished it off last time out, despite being fairly close to an enervating pace. 2-3-6-5 for Ashley, 2-3-6-4 for me. It's the Grade 2 Del Mar Derby, our Sunday DRF race of the day. Good luck.